Everybody hear me okay? I'm not used to talking to a microphone, so I don't want to blast you out, but anyway, my name is Dan Adamson. I'm with Radloff and Associates out of Prince George, and we've been asked to do this governance study for the Village of Valemount. So we're presenting our draft findings tonight, and so thank you very much for coming out. And sorry for the technical challenges. Our projector seemed to have blown a bulb or something, and so Silvio kindly got one from the municipal office, but it seems to be on a different format. So unfortunately, some of the slides are going to get cut off, but I can see them here and I can kind of read them out a little bit, I guess. Or you can all stand around my laptop. We could do that too. So, so what we will cover tonight, we'll talk about why council wanted to do this study, what options were assessed, clarify the property tax system and how that's done, because there's some confusion around that. And so we'll talk about that for a little bit. What are the potential tax changes to the residents? How will service delivery change? How will the added costs of service delivery be paid for? And here's one that's going to get missed here. It also says, what are the key recommendations? So why this study? Well, as you know, VGDR, Valemount Glacier Development Resort, is becoming a reality. And this will affect and change Valemount. You're already seeing big changes in Valemount because of that. So Village Council wanted to know, how do we address the changes from this resort? What's the best opportunity to do that? Should the VGDR become part of the municipality? Is that a good option? Should parts of Area H in the Regional District, Fraser Forge Storage, become part of the municipality? And what's cut off there is, what are the risks and the pros and cons for these? So we want to make sure that everybody is aware that there's no decisions on extending Valemount's boundaries from this study at this time. This is about getting information, compiling, assessing the different pros and cons, getting feedback from the Simp First Nation, from other government levels, and from stakeholders. So you've probably seen, have most of you seen kind of what the three options are? I see a show of hands if people have seen this. So probably most people. So I'll go through this fairly quickly then. So one option is no annexation at all. So it remains the way things are today. Option two is the satellite annexation or addition of the VGDR base area to the village. And as you're aware, I'll move through this quickly because a lot of you are probably familiar with this, but the Master Development Agreement was signed in 2017. The base area is 157 hectares. The Regional District had zoned back in 2016 the area for commercial core and residential development. So it's been zoned for that now. It is planned as primarily a self-reliant municipality in that it's planning to service its own water, its own sewer, storm systems, fire department, electrical, all of those sort of services that traditionally are provided by a municipality. It may ask the municipality for maintenance of roads, of the public roads that they have, and there may be some discussions around solid waste and things like that. But for all intents and purposes, the resort is being planned as self-sufficient. Its target opening of the resort is December 2020, and the bare land sales are targeted to start in 2021. So not long away. Option three is the base area of the resort, as well as annexing part of Area H within the Regional District. And that is about 14.2 kilometers, square kilometers, or about 1,400 hectares. About 2/3 of the area is within the ALR. The primarily zoned for rural residential. The majority is undeveloped, and there's no water or sanitary sewer services within this area. So we were able to look at what properties are included in this area as part of the assessment. So we found there were 76 properties in total with a combined property assessed value of almost $16 million, and that's in 2017. And the residents are represented by the Area H director from McBride, who lives in McBride. And the area also includes the Valemount Airport. So what did we look at? Well, you can imagine that there's a lot of assumptions we have to make. We have to kind of make our best guesses in terms of what the assessed values are going to be, what the new service costs are going to be, what the tax rates are going to be. So we have hypothetical changes to kind of look at what the pros and cons might be. In terms of service delivery for both option 2 and option 3, we looked at road maintenance, solid waste collection, utilities, so the water and sewer, building inspection, bylaw enforcement, planning and development, and general administration and council. And we also wanted to look at the impacts from the VGDR and how to influence the resort. What's the best way of doing that? So one of the things that we wanted to do is to kind of explain, make sure everybody really understands the property tax system. And the way it really starts is that the municipality develops its next year budget. So it'll be developing what its budget is for 2019. And that's the amount of property tax that it would need. The BC Assessment Authority, we all know, in July goes around and does the assessment of our properties. And then the municipality would take that and use that to adjust each of the property classes, the residential, the business, farm, recreation, utilities. So they would adjust each property tax or class to reach a new tax revenue that year, or tax rate, to achieve that target that they need for the costs. So what you pay in taxes depends on the amount of tax revenue needed by the municipality of that year and the change in the assessed value across all properties. So if the value of your property goes up, it doesn't necessarily mean your taxes go up as well. So I've got a little video here that I think is really well done. It's actually from the BC Assessment Authority website, and I'd like to play it for you because I think it explains it really well.
Meet the Johnsons. They live in a typical BC municipality. They are homeowners, and each January, they receive a property assessment notice from BC Assessment, along with all other property owners in BC. Later in the spring, they also receive a property tax notice from their local municipality. Property taxes are determined by your local municipality and based on the assessment value provided by BC Assessment. Let's assume an imaginary town has 3 properties, and all 3 properties have the same assessment value of $100,000. Assuming the total taxes needed to balance this town's budget is $900, then the tax rate must be set at $900 divided by 100,000 plus 100,000 plus 100,000, which equals $0.003, in order to collect the $900 needed for the town to operate for the year. That means each property would have to pay $100,000 times $0.003, or $300. Each property pays their share of taxes based on their assessment value. This looks simple, but let's see what happens the following year when assessment values change. House number 1 is assessed at $150,000, house number 2 at $100,000, and house number 3 at $70,000. House number 1's assessed value increased by 50%. House number 2's stayed the same, while house number 3's decreased by 30%. In this scenario, the town's average assessment value increased by $150,000 plus $100,000 plus $70,000 divided by 3, equaling $106,667, or 6.67%. If the total taxes needed to balance the town's budget are the same in year 2 at $900, then a new tax rate must be calculated in order to balance the budget. $900 divided by $150,000 plus $100,000 plus $70,000, which equals $0.0028125. That means the taxes that each house pays in year 2 will change to $421.88 for house number 1, $281.25 for house number 2, and $196.87 for house number 3. The town still collects the $900 needed to operate for the year, but compared to year 1, each house will pay a difference of plus $121.88 for house number 1, minus $18.75 for house number 2, and minus $103.13 for house number 3. As you can see, how your taxes change each year depends on how your assessment changes in comparison to the average assessment changes in your city. In our example, the average assessment increased by 6.67% to $106,667 in year 2, because house number 2 and house number 3's assessment change was less than the average. They had a tax decrease, even though the city didn't collect more in total taxes. Only house number 1 with a 50% increase in assessment value had to pay a significant increase in taxes. This is a simplified picture of how your taxes are calculated each year. BC Assessment works hard to ensure your property assessment is fair, accurate, and equitable. You and your community benefit as a result. We are BC Assessment, and we value BC.
So I guess, in looking at that, and again, I really apologize, this is getting cut off, but I'll kind of walk through the numbers a bit. So using that, what happens when new areas get added to municipalities? So this is completely hypothetical. These are just made up numbers to kind of illustrate a point. So let's say you've got a village with $1 million projected budget for the next year, and the total residential, just looking at the residential class, is $20 million in total assessed value. And at that year, the tax rate is $50 per 1,000 assessed value. So then you get this area added to the municipality. So we've got a new budget. It's $1,050,000, so it's gone up $50,000. But the total assessed value has gone up by about $10 million. So you can see in this case, the costs went up, but because a lot of assessed values were coming into the community, the tax rate to generate that same budget that they need actually went down. So this is an example where it depends on both of those things having an effect. In another case, you can have, so looking through this chart, you've got the same amounts up top, but then if an area is added in with tremendous amount of costs, so now we've got $350,000 of added costs for this new area that has to be serviced, and the assessed value is only $5 million increased. In this case, this municipality, their tax rates would have likely gone up. This is assuming, it's a very simplified case. It's assuming there's no other budget dollars or other things that can be done. Which, there are other tools that can be used. Just as an example, so here is 2017 tax rates. When we were really focused on this report, the information we had was for 2017, and so we compared the village tax rate for residential property classes with the rural tax rate, so the folks that are in the area H, what they would pay. So you can see it's less. But interesting, when I was looking at the updated financial plan for Valemount, for the village, they showed that in 2017, the assessed values grew enormously. And even though the costs went up for Valemount, the tax rate went down for residential 24%. So the 2018 tax rate went down by 24% because of the assessed values that grew. So, like I say, it gets complicated, and it's lots of variables involved. You can't see the bottom of the slide. Again, I apologize, but the village rate there is 10.7, and the regional district tax rate is 7.5, almost 7.6. So a little bit of difference comparing in 2017. That gap will be much less now in 2018. Oh, and here I have a slide that described that. So I've just talked about that now. So $156 million in total assessed value, so went up 25%. General municipal costs increased by 8%. Tax rates went down. And business tax rates went down too, about 4%. So if we look at the tax revenue for the contiguous area, so the village will be interested in knowing, okay, if we have this area, this contiguous area, we're going to have to provide services to it. So there's going to be some costs. So we need to know how much tax revenue potentially would come from this area H. So again, we looked at all of the different business classes, and the total tax revenue from that contiguous study area, so this isn't all of area H, this is just the defined boundary of the contiguous area, is about $128,000. Now that's based on the rural tax rate. So that's what they're paying as their regional district rate. If we applied the 2018 Valemount tax rate, it would go up by about $20,000, so $148,000. So now the village can say, okay, we know that this is the tax revenue that could come from this area H. Now, how much would the services cost to provide services to that same area? So this is the kind of analysis we did. So you can see there's assumptions being made, but it's kind of important assumptions to kind of figure out what could be the implications for the village. So what services are we talking about? If Area H were to come into Valemount, how would the services be affected? Just going to go back for a second. Okay. So the current Area H services, so the arenas and the TV service and all those things that they pay for now through the regional district would continue. It'd just be flow through different accounting, different funds. So those would all continue. Planning and development would be transferred to the village. So new responsibilities for the planners in the village. The water and sewer would not be an expense at this point with the city because there is no water and sewer services into the Area H or the contiguous area. That could be something down the road if you've got an area that wants to have a subdivision close to some of the existing services, then that could be looked at. Solid waste collection, this could be something that's added. This is something that the village provides, so this could be added to those residents. Bylaws and enforcement would be done locally through the village. Roads, instead of MOTI, like highways maintaining the roads, the village would then maintain the roads. And your electoral representation would be local. So local mayor and council would be your political voice. So how do the options affect the village of Valemount then? What are the changes to Valemount service delivery? So what we did is we looked at all of the services that are provided by the village. And again, I really apologize, this is cut off. But what we did, we have these very detailed Excel spreadsheets that look at all of the different budget areas that the municipality has. So for example, in option number 1, they have building inspection, and that's a shared position, but we're anticipating that even if the resort doesn't become part of the village, there's likely going to be increase in building inspection just because of spin-off development. And again, you're already seeing that. There may be a requirement for a level 3 building inspector, so we put that in. That'll probably typically be a contract. Solid waste collection, probably no change. Water sewer services, no change. Road maintenance, probably an additional 1 kilometer. Just given, again, the spin-off development that's happening in new subdivisions. Bylaw enforcement would probably increase, planning and development, extra hours and FTE for that, as well as we've got 1 FTE for planning and 100 hours for an approving officer. And what's being cut off is general administration, because the village is going to get busier with more business going on, more requests, more inquiries, so they're going to need more assistance. On the flip side, there's going to be more fees collected through development permits and building permits, subdivision fees, so there'll be likely an increase in fees. And then other general anticipated costs. So we did this for each of the options. So for no annexation, for the annexation of the resort, and for the annexation of the resort plus the area. Not a lot of difference between option 2 and option 3. A little bit more service provision for the municipality. What you can't see at the very bottom is under option 1, sort of looking ahead to around 2023, we've got $318,000 in costs. In option 2, there's $602,000, so almost double the costs. And then in option 3 is $656,000, so a slight increase, as I say. So, as I say, this is a summary of the analysis we did, but you can see the type of analysis we did to kind of show what those costs would be. Yeah.
I know people are concerned about the screen. Just to explain it, this is very old technology, has a different resolution. This is a very new computer, and right now they do not match. So it's not that we can lift this as much as we want, but it's not there because the two do not communicate.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that's what happened. And unfortunately, their bulb of their projector doesn't work.
But we should have had handouts.
Well, we do. Most of the stuff that is
But
shown.
in our hands.
Oh,
that we-
yeah.
I'm a visual,
Yeah.
not just one, so I like to put it all together. So I know it's, say
Yeah,
my trees.
it happened. We just have, and we've not been able to match the two, unfortunately. So it's just no. It's still it's different resolution, so it doesn't show what it's missing. No, it's just unfortunate.
On VCTV as well.
So again, these are hypothetical estimates.
And that shows the village doesn't spend any money. We keep the equipment as long as we can. Try 50 years of it.
That's right. So typically, it's not just assessing the tax revenues and the costs. There are other budgetary strategies that municipalities can use. There's other funding that Silvio gets through his grant funding. There are strategies that the community can use in terms of delay hiring or doing, part-time for a while until the revenues catch up. So there are other strategies. And the other thing too is the assets will grow in Valemount, and that will naturally add to the tax base. And so as you can see, these costs and these estimates can vary quite a bit from year to year. Okay, again, it's getting cut off a bit. So what's the hypothetical effect on Valemount? So let's say, if there's no annexation, what would the potential impact be to Valemount by the year 2023? So in general, its tax rate right now is 3.483, and provides on a $250,000 house about $871. In option 1, we increased, basically for 2023, we looked at the assessed values and the costs, and in order to meet the costs, the rate had to go up about 3.95. So about a 0.5 rate difference. So they needed about $988 for each $250,000 house. So the cost in option 1 in 2023, it does go up. Now, in option 2, which is not showing there, so this is VGRD phase 1 being added to Valemount. So by 2023, when we looked at the costs and the assessed values and the tax revenues, we could see that the tax rate could actually go much lower than the 2018 residential tax rate. In fact, it was down to about 2.755 per 1,000. So this was $689 on a $250,000 house. So about $200 less than what was here. This again is projecting out the assessed values that are from the resort that are now part of the total assessed values for the community and the costs, added costs for that, and then looking at what those tax rates would have to be to meet those costs. So what we were projecting was that once VGRD gets developed through phase 1, we would likely see tax rates going down if all other things are equal. So this is a summary, and I think it's on one of the boards over there as well. This fortunately is not cut off because I did one line per slide. So for looking at option 1, no annexation, estimated net assessed value, 156 million. Estimated costs here, estimated tax revenue using Valemount's tax rates and the rural tax rate, and hypothetical change to municipal property tax rate. So what we said here is that if there's no annexation, then what we would likely see in sort of in the immediate term is no change to area H because it's still remaining in the regional district, and a potential slight increase in tax rates for the municipal folks. So that's with option 1 with no annexation. For option 2, this is VGRD coming in to become part of Valemount. So now the assessed values go up. And again, this is around when phase 1 is complete, about 2023. We see the estimated costs have gone up to 1.3, almost 1.3 million. But we also see that using the tax rates, if we use today's tax rates on the new assessed values in 2023, you're going to be collecting more taxes than you need, more tax revenue than you need. So in other words, folks in Valemount would likely see at that time a reduction to their tax rates. In area H, again, no change because they're not part of the equation in this option. Is this making sense? Okay. If we look at option 2, when phase 3 is done, now the pro forma data that we looked at from the resort, I mean, we're talking about a like a Vail, Colorado type resort with very expensive trophy homes, very high quality resort, very high assessed value. So that's the pro forma data that we were using from the developer. So you can see by the end of phase 3, the assessed values, if that was part of Valemount, the assessed values are now well over $700 million. The costs of doing business have gone up, but not that much because again, that community, the resort is fairly self-sufficient. So there is going to be some service, some costs, but not a staggering amount. So we know that, if we were to apply the same tax rate that we have today at that assessed value, we've got almost 3 times the tax revenue that the municipality would need to cover those added costs. So again, no change in Area H, but potential significant increase in or decrease to the taxes, to the tax rates when that resort gets developed. Now, if we look at option 3, so this is the resort and Area H, contiguous area coming in. Again, pretty much the same story because we still have an enormous assessed value. The costs the same, pretty much the same, a little bit more, and the revenues are way more than the village needs based on today's tax rates. So even if Area H were part of the village at that time, we might see actually a decrease from even what their rural rates are, because we anticipate, based on the analysis, that there's such a significant decrease in the tax rate for Valemount that that the rural rate would probably be higher than the Valemount rate at that time. So this is really the charts, and again, the full copy is over there. This is the chart that tells the story of the assessments and the hypothetical tax revenues and costs. So again, it's cut off here. The red is the costs, Valemount costs for doing business. The blue line here is their tax revenue. So you can see this is 2018. So you can see the costs are equal to the tax rate. And this is 2019. You can see the costs going up. The tax revenue we've just shown as being fairly similar. So the costs are a little bit more than what the revenues are. And we can see that this continues until about 2021, where you can't see it, but this green is the tax revenue from the resort, because this means that now in 2021 and so forth, they're starting to get assessed values. So now there's a tax revenue from those assessed values. As the resort develops, its assessed values go up each year until you get into phase 3, and you can see the potential tax revenues from there. If we were to keep the Valemount taxes the same level with just some slight increases due to inflation, like the 3%, you can see, the costs for Valemount are sort of, get steep right here because it's really ramping up. It's ramping up all the servicing that needs to accommodate this development. But once the FTEs are in place and the costs are covered, there's a slow increase. We've given a 3% increase per year. But you can see the tax revenues, if we kept the rates the same, are well beyond what the costs are. So in the early years of the VGDR phase 1, we can see that the costs are probably going to be more than what the revenues are based on today's tax rates. Around 2023 is when we start to see the tax revenues exceed the costs, because that's the time when the resort has enough assets, they have enough asset value that they're generating significant tax revenue. And then beyond that year, the tax rates need to be adjusted because the municipality is collecting more than what it needs to cover its costs. So that's when we potentially could see the tax rates start to decline. One of the comments, we had people on our team that were involved with Revelstoke and other communities that have lived by resorts. And a common comment we heard from every one of those people with experience in this field was they said, you will have impacts and costs to your community, whether the resort is part of your community or not. Better to include them, then you receive benefits and have more influence. This was a common, so I wanted to impart that in our report, that we heard this from other people that have been through this. So, what are our recommendations? We think that the adding of the VGDR base area is a preferred option given the three choices that were provided to us. We think that there's a number of things that could be done as a follow-up, and we provided those in the report. There's things around potentially working with VGDR and a protocol, for example, to start working towards timelines and steps for annexation, about what that might look like, about more discussions in service agreements, discussions around fire and protection services. So more detailed discussions over the next few years, or whatever timeline you think is appropriate. We don't see appreciable benefits for village or the residents for annexation of the contiguous area. We think it would be a hard sell to bring that area into the municipality given the tax changes, that getting people to pay more taxes might be a bit of a struggle. They're not going to get a lot more services. I mean, it's great to have a local council, instead of an area H director, and nothing gets area H director, but it's nice to have local political voice. It's nice to have an office you can go to right here to get service delivery and things like that. So there are some benefits, but things like water and sewer, not so likely. So it might be a hard sell to the people in the rural folks. In the what? Guaranteed, yeah. And I got to say, I mean, a lot of the people that we talked to really like this regional district. They think they're doing a great job and they're happy with the service too. So we consider annexation of VGDR when phase 1 has progressed substantially. And this question comes up, okay, if this is a good idea for Valemount, what's the right time? If you leave it too late, it becomes more complicated. There's more residents involved and the subdivisions get built. If you go in too early, there's a potential higher risk. What if the resort doesn't develop the way it's intended to? So what's perhaps the best time? And actually, I might go back and identify this. This is this point, 2023, based on the current timelines that the resort have, is the time when they've really sunk that hook. They've really made a commitment. They've got substantial investment on the ground. They've got their bare land sales up and running. You can see how that's taking off. It's starting to have enough assets that you can collect those revenues, those tax revenues. So we're thinking somewhere around 2023 might be a good time for the annexation. So that timing reduces the risk. It allows for enough time for that the assessed value at the resort to offset those added costs. It's early enough to support the influence of the resort. So this is a key thing, is if it's part of Valemount, you have a much more direct influence on that resort. And Based on everything I've heard, the working relationship between the Albertes and the resort overall and council and administration is fantastic. It's a great working relationship. No reason why that couldn't continue. And that's a great way to influence these resorts, is through that relationship. And also the timing before significant residential development occurs, because part of the process, there is a lot of lengthy steps to annexation, and ultimately you have to get the provincial government approval. A part of that is a process around referendums, but the government also wants to make sure that the people that are coming in are in support. They're very likely not to approve an annexation if the residents or business people of that area are not in favor of the annexation. So the more you leave it to more residences, and a lot of these residents may be out of town, maybe foreign householders and so forth. So if you leave that too late, it may be difficult to get everybody on side. We've also structured the governance report with these very workable Excel spreadsheets where we've identified all of the assumptions we've made in terms of tax revenues, assessed values, and all the costs related to the staff position that we think the village is going to need. So the village now has a workbook that it can use. So every year it can update that. It can say, well, what were those Radloff guys thinking? The assessed value is way too much. We need to tone that down a bit, or, something else. So there may be changes with the regional district and how positions are shared. So they can go in and change those FTE numbers, and then the costs will change. So we think, just keep using this governance report to keep updating as the information evolves. And that's it. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions, and I might even be able to answer some of them.
Thank you for that presentation. And I just have a couple of concerns. Everything I heard was related to money here. And I heard Vail, Colorado, where property values went up. I love the community that I live in, and I'm concerned that if the property values go up and up, then my neighbors are going to have to move, and that's going to destroy the social fabric of my community. Did your study address any of that?
Well, yeah, to a degree. We were more focused on municipal services and what the risks were to the municipality. But you're absolutely right. That has to be a concern that the village would have more of these kind of meetings to talk about. There are good examples to look at in other places like Whistler where those challenges are happening. I know there's an affordable housing committee started, and there's going to be some work on that. I guess the question is, if the resort's going ahead anyway, you're already seeing your assessed values going up just because of speculation on the resort. I don't know if you're going to be able to stop that. If the resort is going ahead, whether it's part of Valemount or not, I don't know how you're going to be able to stop that assessed value going up. For people who are already living here, that shouldn't be a huge problem. It's people that want to come into Valemount and now can't afford a house, potentially. Like you can't, who could afford a house in Whistler now? So I think if you're already here, it shouldn't be too much of a problem.
There's a lot of people renting and have to renegotiate a mortgage, and I can see where people are going to have to move away because there's just no place left for them. Also, politically, I'm a little concerned about the boundary expansion inviting super rich people to end up being the governing body in the rest of the village. Have you any advice in that regard?
No, it's a good question. It's something we didn't really look at in detail. I think one of the conversations we had with one of our team members talked a little bit about that, but I don't know if there was any real solutions about it. But you know, your point is taken.
Planted a seed.
Yeah, no, it's good, and these are all, I'm sure, you know, mayor and council will have more of these, and you know, this is really to help understand the costs and the risks around that, but there needs to be these other conversations about the impact to the community overall, and how do you manage that, for sure. Yeah, good comments. Yes.
You've had discussions with Revelstoke as well as Sun Peaks, but especially Revelstoke. I don't see where any of the newcomers there have bothered to put their names forward to be on the governing council. They just don't have the time. Yeah,
and that's a good point. I was thinking more of just kind of being a resident and voting, but I didn't sort of think about the idea that they would actually run. But you're right, Mayor, Your Worship, you're correct that yeah, we don't know of people. In fact, they wouldn't be allowed to if they're foreigners. You have to be a Canadian citizen to run anyway. So a local resident. That's right.
A resident of BC for at least 6 months.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Other comments? Yeah.
I'm wondering if Golden, of course, Golden is the example of the opposite, right? Where Golden chose the option 1. Right. Do you look at the Golden at all?
I didn't personally. One of our team members did. Who mentioned the fellow that has experience with working with some of these other resorts, and I think again he was saying that some of the issues. You know, again, you get some of the issues with these resorts with limited benefit from it. And
I just have a follow-up for that. In the different scenarios, you listed different kilometers of road that would be added to the village as sort of a financial responsibility with the taxes. I get that the assessment up on the hill would be different, higher. But there's also the potential too for like road clearing at 800 meters versus 1100 meters. I imagine it would be different in terms of snow removal. I think some municipal services may work out differently too, just given sort of like that change in elevation. So I'm wondering if that sort of, that qualitative aspect of, okay, now you have 2,000 bed units, essentially equivalent, up on the hill, servicing them, is that much more expensive than Valemount? Was that something else?
yeah, we did look at that, and so the public road up to the sort of the main base area will still be MLTI, managed as a public road. The public roads within, so they'll have some private kind of areas right within the commercial core, but then the main access road feeding the subdivisions, the two or three main subdivisions, we took the kilometerage of those based on their master plan and their pro forma. I think we added a 50% cost to this. So we have a cost from the village per kilometer cost for maintenance, which include the snow removal, and I think we added 50% to that. So, and again, you know, if down the road there's a new information, the village can quickly change that within the worksheet that we provided. Yeah.
What the question remains then, you're adding 50% only, but you're adding 2,000 houses up there, because that's the baseline numbers that we've been hearing, is 2,000 houses in the subdivision.
2,000
Bed units. So that would be 1,000 houses then, based on?
More, sometimes hotel, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I see. Because then you can have, because they increase, if you have 2,000 people and there's 1,000 people in the village, why would you only increase it up to 50%?
Well, we measured the kilometerage of public roads based on their master plan, and so I think it was like seven kilometers or something like that. Can't remember the exact number. And then we knew the figure per kilometer for maintenance, so we just increased the maintenance cost by 50% to cover that added snow load.
Basically, that 7 kilometers is what they say that the 2,000 bed units will accommodate. So you only need 7 kilometers in order to fit that 2,000 beds.
Does that answer your question? Okay.
Versus 17.
Yeah.
Is there a timeline for increasing costs of the resort? I just talked with a friend in St. Pete's. He's a business owner there. And it's interesting now, it's a new municipality. And they are now owning, the town of St. Pete's owns now all the systems, infrastructure, streets, since 2 years. Everything is brand new. But what happens in 20 years? The depreciation of those costs, perhaps, I don't know how much it is, it could be millions, then in 20 years. Now we have, for 20 years, enough time to save money, but politicians are willing to save money over 20 years. I don't believe that.
Well, most of these will set up a utilities, a private utilities that will have, they'll do life cycle costing on their infrastructure, and they'll develop they'll have a levy on their utility to cover those and put that away for replacement costs and repair. So in this case, I mean, it's a little bit out of our scope here in terms of what exactly they will be doing, but that's typically what's done.
And it's legislated by the province. Asset management.
Right, that's right.
Yeah. Thank you. I just wanted to say that usually there is 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 split. Federal government gives 1/3, the provincial government gives 1/3, and the municipality has to have 1/3. And so reserves, that's why you have reserves for water, reserves for sewer. And if the project is really huge, like we had our water filtration project here in 2009. It was a $3 million project. The feds gave $1 million, the province gave $1 million, and the municipality had to borrow $700,000 to make up its $1 million. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Your Worship. Any other comments or? Yes.
I apologize for standing up again.
No worries.
I missed your name at the very beginning.
Dan Adamson.
Pleased to meet you, Dan. And who do you work for?
Radloff and Associates, and we're out of Prince George. We're an engineering and planning firm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And is there a PDF of your presentation available?
I can ask Silvio about, maybe I'll get Silvio to answer that.
Once it's received by council, it will be online on valemount.ca.
Thank you.
Welcome.
For me, another question, but the part of the real district H, it's why is Crockett Creek only partly included in the town and other parts not in town in the future?
Right. Maybe
Who made this decision? It's interesting on the map to see there.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the boundary for Area H was a contiguous area was developed.
Do you want to answer what happened? Are you talking the Hillside Road or?
No, not the hillside road, I mean the airport road. On this side. We are now, I'm then part of the city, but I think interestingly the airport road is outside, partly outside from town and partly inside town. This could be interesting.
Where's the boundary end?
Yeah, the boundary is a little
I
bit tricky
think
there.
the boundaries, they have been chosen according to the property lines and just to make a straight line.
Is
So
that
there's no,
Crooked Creek? What is it? How far toward Gijon
I
did it
don't
go?
remember, we would have to.
Is there anything up here that helps?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that doesn't really tell you anything.
shows a bunch of blue and white, like it doesn't tell you where the boundary is, like whose properties are they, where's the line?
What I mean is, this is the airport road. This is the line. Then the town has to make a snow rule on this part and this part, and then another guy has to come and make this part. Or why is it, normally this is part, for my feeling, it's, for my emotion, this is part of the town, this subdivision. The people don't like that probably, but it's...
No, one of the main reasons was to keep out the road, so that the road would not fall under the responsibility of the new village or the expanded village. Yes. Thanks. Yes.
Silvio, that little bump on the end there, is that the airport?
Yeah.
Property? Okay.
So this is a question for Silvio more. When you're saying to keep the road out, are you saying to keep Crooked Creek Road out? Because like the Crooked Creek Road is the road that obviously concerns us, I mean, us.
Just so Modi can take it.
Again, remember, these are just kind of all hypothetical assumptions. And when these lines were picked, we had a working group before we hired a consultant to do all this work. And part of the working group were members of the Mountain Resort Branch, Regional District, and the village. And of course, the village staff, Regional District staff, they always have been aware of the extremely high cost, for instance, in wintertime of snow removal. So if all this area were included within the village boundaries, then the village would have to take care also of the road that goes to the airport. And of course, those are high costs. And we know exactly the cost. We know the cost per kilometers, winter, summer, for the whole year, right? So that's why we exactly followed the property lines. So these are exactly property lines. Most of these areas, they're even crown land. All this crown land is also under the ALR. There are undeveloped areas, and that's why we picked an area that would go close to the proposed glacier destination resort area, but excluded, most likely, or most importantly, the road. So the road exclusion was a conscious decision, because we know how much it costs to do road maintenance. And in fact, when Dan talked about the roads within the municipality, the important thing to understand is here, that is high density, so 7 kilometers of roads probably service around 2,000 beds. We don't know how many houses or homes that would be. We know there at the end, phase 3, there are going to be 3 hotels, so the hotels will almost provide 1,000 beds. But that's why here you need fewer roads than, of course, in our area within the municipality, right? And again, this line, I repeat, was just done to keep the road outside. And then there's one important reason. There are many lots and properties here, and we're also aware this whole process, if the village asked the ministry to go ahead for a boundary extension, and if we went ahead for this kind of type of boundary expansion and also included this year, yes, there's also a referendum involved, and most likely all the people that are in the regional district, as we said, for many different reasons, the regional district provides good services, the taxes are lower and so on, most likely they would even not want to be included in extension. So also from that perspective, it most likely wouldn't work. So there are many reasons, right? The referendum also plays a big role. And when we talk referendum, of course, it's also important to know for the local residents, also the local residents will also take part of that referendum too. So, and again, the numbers and this whole study now will give us a chance to at least to compare all the 3 options, and then in the next 2 or 3 years, Mayor and Council can look at it again, ask the ministry to start the whole procedure, the whole process, and of course that also would include a public consultation forum that most likely, it doesn't have to be a referendum, but most likely it has always been a referendum in the past. So I hope that answers your question there. Thanks.
questions? Okay. Well, I'm happy to stay here if people have follow-up questions and want to walk around and look at more of the displays and have other questions. We'll be here for a little bit. So thank you very much, everybody. You've been very good, very kind, and have a good evening. Thank you.